That's all I can say is wow. I was reflecting earlier as the elders were praying over Lisa and I, and I'm originally from upstate New York, and just bear with me. My understanding of hot summers is radically different from yours, but it felt like it was a warm summer day, and we were in. I remember when it would get really hot, we'd go down by the creek behind our house, and there was a swimming hole, and I felt like we were just kind of soaking in a swimming hole, and just enjoying that cool drink. And sometimes, it was really good water coming down from the mountain, and we just kind of get a little bit in our mouth, and it was just really refreshing. And that's what it feels like being here. Is it's just a refreshing for our souls. So thank you for allowing us to be part of this today. My name is Chris Cree. My wife Lisa over there. We're graduates of Charis Bible College. I know you all are connected to Charis, and so you're familiar with what that means. We went out to Charis in 2011, graduated in 2013, and on our second year mission trip, we were on a trip that went to the United Kingdom, and we were going to England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So it was kind of a whirlwind thing. And when we went actually, let me just back up before we went. For those of you who aren't familiar with how Charis sends out mission trips, typically the whole school comes together and prays over the team before they go off. And as the school was praying for us, one of our friends, our classmates, a lady named Sue Nutman, that if you're familiar with Charis, you might have seen her teach sometimes. She was one of our classmates. She flows in the prophetic, and she had one hand on Lisa's shoulder, one hand on my shoulder, and she said, "I hear the Lord say you're going home. You're going home." And I thought, I'm from New York. That's weird. So I didn't know what to do with that, so I just set it on the shelf. And Lisa was like, "Well, we're not going to see Jesus. This plane ain't crashing." So we didn't know what to do with that, but we didn't reject it. We just set it aside because our brains couldn't couldn't wrap around it. Well, anyway, we go to England, we go up to Scotland, and we went to a Charis Bible College to minister there in England, and then we went to a church that is associated with a ministry in Scotland that's pastored by a man named John Donnelly and his wife Susan. Phenomenal little church there in Scotland. And then we went over to Northern Ireland. And as we're crossing, we're riding on the bus to get to the ferry to go over to Northern Ireland, Lisa sees a sign for a town. It's called Creetown. Creetown. Drive a little further, cross over the River Cree. Now, we never see our last name anywhere in the States, and here it is twice. And I was like, that's weird. So I get home, I ask my family, where does the name come from? Because I never knew. I had friends who were like, I'm Italian-American. We actually, a little town, upstate New York, 55 students in my high school class, and we had a couple of a guy whose parents were Lebanese. They were Lebanese immigrants into America. They knew where their ancestry was. Chris, what are you? I'm American. I just didn't know. So my parents didn't know. I asked my grandparents. They're like, I'm not sure. So I got online, did research, because that's what I do. And come to find out, it looks like my ancestor emigrated from Scotland to America in the early 1700s. He immigrated into New Jersey. My dad was born in Elizabeth, New Jersey. And the highest per capita of the family named Cree on the planet was in a little town called Kilmarnock, which is just an hour up the road from where we were. I was going home and didn't even know it. And that spoke to my heart and put a love in my heart for the Scottish people. And then there's a whole nother story that we'll share for another time that God spoke to Lisa and her heart a whole different way about opening a Charis Bible College in Scotland. And so, okay, God, we'll go to Scotland and open a Charis Bible College. But there was a whole long process. That was in 2013. We graduated second year. We did third year. We followed their plan. But it still took us another 2.5 years after we graduated third year to get to Scotland. And it was just an adventure. We had to stand in faith on some things because it looked like there was no way it was going to happen the way that we thought God was telling us. And then we took that back to God and said, God, they're saying, and he's like, I told you this. And we're like, yes, sir. But you got to tell them because we can't do it without the ministry agreeing. And so, but we're not going to argue and try to tell him anything. It's up to him to convince them, which he did eventually, but it took some years. And we had to grow. We had to work on our communication skills. I'm going to share some of that this morning. And we had to learn. One of the big things we had to learn was how to how to walk in the kingdom in the area of finances. So we did that, and we'll talk about that today in detail. But we went to Scotland. we established a school there. There's a Charis Bible College in Dumfries, Scotland now. And God brought us a team. He brought us students. He gave us a wonderful location. He brought us finances. And things are rocking and rolling. And you got to understand, when I go to a place to move, I'm like there for the rest of my life. So I was like, paint my face blue, Mel Gibson, Braveheart, freedom. And I'm going to be there for 20 years. Well, 4.5 years in, God tells us to pass the baton. It's time to go home. The next directors are in front of you. It's like, okay, all right. So we talked about that. We prayed about that because my concern was, I want to get the timing right. And God showed me that now was the time. So we went and we went through that process. And that was a process of doing a clean handoff with the next director so that we could honor them and put them in a good spot. And now that school is moving on from strength to strength with Andrew and Jasmine Sharp, who are phenomenal leaders leading that. They're probably better leaders than we are. And that's a little intimidating, but that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to raise people up and let it go from strength to strength. So now we're back here in the States. We live in Colorado Springs and we have our own ministry because remember I said we had to raise funds to get to Scotland. And so we established New Creations Ministries. Of course, we have a creative spelling. We add an extra E, New Creations, because that's what we do. And so we established that back in 2013. So we're ministering now. I like to teach. I like to explain. I like to see people get revelation of the kingdom of God and then grow and experience that and walk in it. Because one of the things that I thought before I came to Charis was that the kingdom of God, that was for eternity. And my job here was to be saved and know that I'm saved and hold on until I step into eternity, then I can really enjoy life. But that's not what the Bible teaches. The kingdom of God is for here and now and for eternity. We can access the kingdom of God here and now, and we can experience the same types of things that they experienced on the pages of Acts here and now. So that's my passion. And because we had to learn how to raise, how to receive from the kingdom of God, we were responsible for raising our own funds. That's the way the world would say it. You got to raise the money so you can get to the mission field, because we were missionaries. But from the kingdom perspective, really what we had to learn was how to receive. Because the truth is, Lisa and I were really good at giving. We were very generous. We sowed lots of seed. Where we were lacking was we didn't know how to receive. We didn't know how to harvest. And that's an important thing because the kingdom of God is built on giving and receiving. And if all we do is give, we're missing out on half of the kingdom of God, right? And not only are we missing out because we're not receiving, but we're robbing other people of the blessing because we're keeping them from giving into us. So we had to change a lot of our thinking. And that's what I want to talk about today. Because money, I know you start talking about money in a church setting and people get all but there's a reason why people get all and it's because money's so connected to our hearts. And really, for the first 15 years or so that Lisa and I were married, we had what I refer to as intense fellowships, which really means we argued a lot, but it sounds more scriptural. So it sounds more religious and just nicer to say we had intense fellowships. But we argued a lot. And 99% of those arguments, if you went down to the core issue, it was something about money. Why is that? I remember one time we had a particularly bad and intense fellowship. And, you got to understand, I'm better with words than Lisa is, so I would get her twisted around, and then she would feel defeated, and she would cry, and then I'd get angry, or maybe I got angry, and then she'd cry. But either way, we were not communicating very well, and she got really. This one she didn't cry, she got angry, and she like kicked a chair over. It's not on her because it was on me, because I realized, as the husband, it was my fault. Because I don't like talking. You got to understand, I don't like talking about money. Most of my life, I would dodge the money thing. If it came to negotiation, I'm like, Okay, how much do I owe you? Just, and it was like, whew, they see me coming a mile away. Whereas Lisa was really good at keeping the books, I was like, I don't want the detail stuff. I'll do the big plan, but the detail stuff would kind of, and she had to pay the bills. And so we would, typically, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation, but we had too much month at the end of our money. So how's she going to pay the bills? And I don't like talking about money, so I would just kind of avoid the subject. And then eventually the pressure would build and we'd have an intense fellowship. Just kind of the way it worked. But that was my fault. I knew that as the leader. I'm supposed to lead. And I didn't know how to solve the problem. And she didn't know what to do because there wasn't enough money to pay the bills. And so we got into what we called the crazy cycle, where it just seemed like we would go round and round and round. And sometimes we even knew that we were going there and we still went there anyway. And it was like over and over again. And so, there were a whole lot of reasons why we went to Charis, but one of the big ones was we wanted to improve our communication. We wanted to renew our minds. We wanted to break the crazy cycle. And the reality was, the issues were money. And one of the things that we learned in Bible college, which is so important to our identity, is that Jesus, among other things, he part of what he gave us, part of what he won for us through the cross and his resurrection is our prosperity. And it's not just financial. It's dealing with, we're prosperous in our health. We're prosperous in our relationships. We're prosperous in the things that control us so we don't have addictions, all of that stuff. But it does include money as well. We are prosperous, but there's a difference between knowing that you are prosperous and knowing how to walk in kingdom prosperity.